Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And after taking a little bit of a break, we are back to discuss the Orioles' quick exit from the 2024 postseason. And we're going to talk about the bad stuff, but we're not going to dwell on it entirely. We are going to look ahead to the offseason, which hopefully will be an eventful one in a good way here in Birdland, and we will break that down tonight. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today, get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. And now, as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome a new member to our Patreon community. And for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, thank you to Josh Lynn for signing up for a year at the single A level. Josh is a great member of our Discord, also a great Twitter follow. And also, if you need another reason to sign up for our Patreon, which even though it's the off season, still got plenty of good stuff going on over there. Congrats to former guest of the show and host of the Warehouse Pod, Elijah Ginsberg, for winning the Player of the Game tournament or challenge, I don't know, contest that we do on the Patreon only Discord, where you try to pick the best player of every game, and the winner, I got to put together a prize package for Eli, but it's going to get sent out sometime in the off season. So congrats to Eli as well.
We've had Eli on the show. We enjoy his insights. So please tell me you're not sending him the Yusniel Diaz jersey.
No, I can't. I can't do that to Elijah. To Eli, I can't. But I'll think of something. I'll think of something good.
And one note before we dive into tonight's episode, we are less than a week away from our live show at Checker Spot Brewing. That will be Monday, October 14th. We're slated to begin at about 6 p.m. And we're going to make that episode basically a state of the Orioles. We're going to talk about 2024, but we're also going to look ahead to the offseason, talk about some of the moves the Orioles might make. And we're going to kind of take a bigger picture approach than we are on tonight's episode. And we're going to have some guests on the show. You've already heard us mention that Connor Newcomb, the host of Locked On Orioles, will be joining us. And we're happy to announce that a frequent guest of ours, Andy Koska, the Baltimore Banner, is set to join us as well. You won't want to miss that at Checker Spot Brewing. In addition to talking to Andy and Connor, we will take questions from our listeners. That will be over at Checker Spot Brewing, located not far from Oriole Park at Camden Yards at 1421 Ridgely Street in Baltimore. Once again, that's Monday, October 14th. At 6 p.m. Now, back to the unpleasant stuff. The Orioles division or wild card round exit at the hands of the Kansas City Royals. Coming in, we knew that the Orioles had a lot of challenges. They had not hit the ball particularly well over the second half of the season. They were going up against a team with a very good pitching staff. At the same time, though, the Orioles had a good week to close out the regular season. They were going to have up to 3 straight playoff games at home against a team that they had won the series against during the regular season. It was not meant to be, though, and it was certainly not at the fault of the Orioles pitching staff, which limited the Royals to just 3 runs over 2 games. The offense, though, did not deliver, scored just 2 runs in the whole series, or scored just 1 run in the whole series, coming on a solo home run from Cedric Mullins in Game 2. There were opportunities in both games for the Orioles to come up with a big inning, including bases loaded, no out in the 5th of Game 2, and unfortunately, they cannot cast that in. There's a lot of emotion around this loss, and that's kind of why we decided to take a week off after the Orioles bowed out early. But Nick, let's just kind of take a minute to unpack what exactly happened. The Orioles had not been hitting well for a few months leading up to the playoffs. But I think it was still a little bit of a gut punch to see the bats struggle the way they did in that series.
Yeah, that I think for me that was just the most frustrating part of all of this, and that we spent all the second half of the season, really, even more than that. But we spent so much time so concerned about the pitching staff. You need to go out and do we get Crochet? Do we get Scooble? Like, how aggressive do you get the trade deadline to increase or to make the pitching staff stronger. You have the injuries that go down with starters, relievers. We need to strengthen the bullpen. There's so much emphasis on pitching, pitching, pitching. And with hitters, it was just like, this line is going to be good. That's not the issue. Pitching is the issue. And then we get to the playoffs and hitting is the issue. So that was frustrating. The takes were wild. We'll say that afterwards. And I think we hit on this with Connor the last time we were on. Last time we were all on together about, firing the hitting coaches isn't probably necessarily going to do anything. Firing Hyde isn't really going to solve any issues. I don't know what exactly needs to be solved, but clearly, like I still think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic in the immediate future. It is what it is. Like the playoffs. Look at the playoffs right now. I mean, we could be heading towards a Mets versus Tigers World Series. Who would have predicted that coming into the year? Not a single person. If anyone out there has a Tigers versus Mets World Series slip on one of those betting sites, no free ads, show me. I'd love to see it because that's an unbelievable win for you. It is what it is. It is frustrating, but it's done. We look ahead to the offseason now and hopefully better things to come in the near future. We've got new ownership in place. We don't know what they're going to do this offseason. Let's see what they can do and what kind of build returns to the field next year. Like it was honestly, now I'm thinking about it, I just feel like one of the biggest issues was something that the Orioles just couldn't help. It was the injury variance was not on their side this year. And that's something, again, you can't help. It was really good last year. It wasn't, the Orioles weren't as fortunate this year.
Yeah, you hold a team to 3 runs over 2 games and get swept in those 2 games. It's not exactly a recipe for success. Not going to lie, I think after game 1, I was more upset. But then once we tied it up, Cedric Mullins hits a home run, get the bases loaded, nobody out, and we don't score, then I was pretty much resigned to, okay, it's over. And unfortunately, that was the case. But optimist as I am looking forward to next season because even if we bring back the same exact team and make no upgrades anywhere, I still feel pretty good about this team and have a chance to win the division again next year. It's just a young team. I think that's the one thing people forget is how young these guys still are. Gunnar just turned 23. Kobe Mayo will turn 22, I think, in December. Jackson Holliday, 21. Something like that. These guys are all super young. Even Colton Cowser, who, he swung at a pitch to hit him, but if you look up Pitching Ninja, you'll see why. Because if that was a slider, which the previous pitch before that was, it was going to be over the plate. So no harm, no foul. Hopefully he has his surgery and recovers. And I think these guys are just going to grow from year to year. Gunner's going to continue to get better. Adley, no doubt he was banged up. Maybe not injured, but hurting and lacking his typical numbers from the first half. If you look at Dan Sanchez's Twitter, he does a good job of breaking down the bat speed, decreased in the second half, and other things as well. I think Adley will be fine. Cowser's just going to continue to grow. Holliday and Mayo, we saw the jump Cowser made. Hopefully Mayo and Holliday can make similar jumps next year. But, yeah, coping mechanism is to look forward to next year. Yeah, it was a rough 2 games.
Well, let's talk for a minute about the hitting coaches because the 3 of us defended the Orioles hitting coaches, especially Ryan Fuller and Matt Borg-Salty, and you have Cody Assey, who's part of the Orioles hitting staff. I think the 3 of them have done good work over the last 2 years, and for Fuller and Borg-Salty, that's been over the last 3 seasons at the major league level. And I personally don't feel any different than I did a couple of weeks ago, but Mike Elias in his postseason press conference really did not give us any assurances about the coaching staff, except that Brandon Hyde will be back as manager. Do either of you read anything into that?
Not really. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if there's some slight changes. I'm not expecting much. Like Connor has said, the message will be the same. This was the best offense in baseball in the first half. And then for a month or 2 there, you're relying on guys like Emmanuel Rivera, an overmatched Jackson Holliday at the time. half the lineup. O'Hearn had to be full time instead of platoon. Like there was a lot going on with injuries and just a lot of times guys were hitting the ball hard and it was getting caught. So I think a little bit of bad luck. I think in 2023 we had really good luck with runners in scoring position. Not so much the case this year. So those things I think are just kind of luck or they can vary from year to year. So not concerned at all. But maybe if they feel like someone's not getting the message across the right way, then maybe they can make a shift. But it's going to be the same idea. I think the key is going to be is do they make any changes, not necessarily with who's telling and teaching the players how to hit. It's more like, do we not go as all out? They're still going to want to hit the ball hard and in the air, but maybe there's some small tweaks they can make here and there.
Yeah, like what the Orioles are doing isn't novel in any way either. Like multiple teams employ double hitting coaches. Like this, it's not. Again, the takes on the hitting coaches and the manager right after the season, and like fan how you want to fan, like be extreme. Like if this bummed you out and you were super frustrated and pissed off, like I think a lot of the expectation was super high. There's nothing wrong with that. But like some of the tweets I saw were like legit like tagging Ryan Fuller in these tweets who he unfollowed everybody. That's not like strictly with like baseball ops people like with the Orioles or who he's worked with. He unfollowed everybody else on social media because he got sick of it, I'm sure. Because some of the tweets that I saw were mind blowing. You would never say that to another human being to their face. Some of the things that I saw, and it was absolutely disgusting. Um, but I think with Michael Elias's comments, like, yeah, like you're gonna sit down in the warehouse in the war room. I don't know if you can say war room anymore, but I'm going with it. You're gonna sit there. You're gonna evaluate everything. You're gonna evaluate the coaches. You're gonna evaluate the philosophy. You're gonna sit down with the analysts. You're gonna sit down and evaluate everything. And if they feel like a change is necessary, then they're gonna make a change. Sometimes it's like we've all said 100 times now, it's the messaging isn't going to change, but maybe there is something to, maybe it's just a different voice that needs to say it. And if that's the case, then that's the case. Um, I do think there will be some changes. That's just natural year to year. Like how often do these entire staffs remain the same? There's going to be shakeups, but I don't think it's going to be a situation where they sit down and say, Ryan Fuller, you're fired because of this playoff performance. That's not going to be the case. At worst, he gets reassigned somewhere else in the organization. Like same with Matt Bork-Schulte. Or they decide, hey, I want to move on to a different challenge or whatever. But I envision at least one of them for sure being back next year. Like it like Bob said, it was a lot of bad luck. It was just super frustrating. It's just baseball. Like I think another thing too, you're talking about the young guys. Like yes, this lineup is very young, very inexperienced. I know we said that last year, especially with the pitching staff. Now we're using that excuse with the hitters while we're sitting here. You're watching the other Jackson Churio, have a phenomenal postseason, which the Brewers are still in it.
Merrill too.
Yeah, Jackson Merrill, like God, that kid is so good. Like you're watching so many of these young stars just shine in the postseasons for their other teams. Like don't lose the faith in that though for what these Orioles are doing because yeah, the Padres got Jackson Merrill and he's hitting well and he should be NL Rookie of the Year over Paul Skeens. Not a hot take, but like you got and Jackson Churio and others like. Yeah, they're doing phenomenal things, and it'd be great to see R. Jackson do that. It'd be great to see Gunnar do that, to see Gunnar step up and be our Francisco Lindor. He had a great night just before we hopped on. Like that's going to come. That's going to happen. It's the number of guys the Orioles are producing is unlike so many other organizations. Like give them time. We're seeing these guys settle in and step up, and I think their times are definitely going to shine soon enough.
Yeah, and I would like to say, like, the season was not a success. I think everyone can agree with that. This is not what we wanted. We didn't win the division. We didn't win a playoff game. Bounced out early again. But at the same time, I'm not, like, devastated by it because, again, we are so young, and there's still more cavalry on the way. Samuel Basallo is still right there in the minor leagues. We if you listen to this podcast, you know the names, you know what's gonna be a successful run here for at least the rest of this decade and probably much longer. So, yeah, be upset, be down, and hopefully they make the right changes to get it right. But long term, still, my view hasn't changed on the organization.
Did you guys read any? I know a lot of people, I feel like, wrote the same article. I only read one, but did you guys read any of these? The Orioles are behind schedule articles, takes right after the season.
No, and I
No.
hate them because we were ahead of schedule last year, and now we're behind schedule. What is the schedule? Like, this is insane. I mean, if you even look at it with all the injuries, we still won 91 games, and we're the top wild card. I don't know. I mean, disappointing, yeah, but I don't know about this behind schedule thing.
Uh, well, if you guys, I can pull this one up because I read one this morning because I didn't know if I wanted to bring this up. But
Could this get Zach's worst take of the season award at the end of the year? We'll see.
If we can run through it, I mean, I don't know if I'm throwing the. I want to know if I'm throwing the outline at the window or not. But
No,
tell
go
me to
ahead.
shut up. All right, perfect. Let's see. I'm gonna pull up Baseball America. This is the only one I read. I don't know. I think there was at least one or two Orioles beat reporters that wrote one. I don't know who else did. It was a common take. But here's JJ Cooper's from Baseball America. And I feel like in the second part of the episode, we're going to sing many praises of Baseball America. But this article by JJ Cooper, I felt was, I completely disagree with this whole premise that the Orioles are behind schedule. I think it's a BS take. And in his piece alone, let's see here. Some of the reasons, I'm not going in order here, so sorry about that, but it's okay. You still get the point. Some of the reasons he cited for why the Orioles are behind schedule. Playoff attendance numbers. What does that have to do with anything? If you're going to announce game times 1 to 2 days before the series starts, you're playing a weekday games at what, 4 o'clock? Was that every game was like 4 o'clock?
Yep.
How many people can take off work last minute like that? Find childcare, rearrange your entire week at the drop of a hat. Like, Bob lives how close to Camden Yards? How difficult is it for you
Couldn't happen.
to get to a game?
Would never happen.
I'm 3 hours away. It's definitely not happening 2 days in advance. My wife would laugh in my face if I said, tomorrow I'm going to Camden Yards to watch this playoff game at 4 o'clock.
I wish my wife would laugh in my face if I told her that. Yeah, but
Like,
that was a league-wide thing, too. Like, a bunch
Yeah.
of the games in the afternoons had low attendance because, obviously.
Exactly. Houston, I haven't, we were talking about this before. I'm not watching a ton of other games. I'm following along. I did watch the wild card games I watched more of. But Houston, that first game was empty. I feel like Camden Yards is more full than that, but that won't fit JJ Cooper's narrative, so he didn't include all the other empty stadiums. The Orioles don't have the number one farm system anymore. Arbitrary ranking. And there's not going to be the logjam in AAA like there was this year. You're not going to see that top, but there's still, 2 top 100 or fringe top 100 arms in Brandon Young and Chase McDermott there. Bob mentioned Samuel Basayo. If Judd Fabian takes another step forward, Judd Fabian profiles as a perfect fourth outfield type at the end of next season. Like, you listen to this show. If you're regular to the show, you know what's going down in the minor leagues.
Also, Kobe Mayo is still eligible.
Exactly. Like, we're in a perfectly good spot. Let's see here. Yeah, Mayo getting a taste. Jackson Holiday getting a taste. Yeah, they're set up nicely for 2025. Payroll. The payroll's too low. This ownership group they weren't in place until the season started, and just yesterday before they announced all these new hirings, like Rubenstein and this ownership group are still putting their pieces in place behind the scenes on like the business ops side of things. Let them settle in first. They're Gunnar and Adley, they're not free agents after this winter. It's okay. Santander and Burns were the only two. We'll talk about them. There's still a month of baseball left to be played. Can we at least finish the World Series and see what this ownership group is going to do and see what Elias is going to do with financial backing for the first time ever before we dump on the payroll? That was a lame excuse. It's time for the organization to seek external help for pitching. What organization doesn't need to seek external help for pitching? Like, why is the price tag for arms and free agency so high? Why do you have to trade an arm and a leg to get another arm in return? Because pitching's so scarce.
How did we get Corbin Burns and Zach Eflin? And even, God, I'm already forgetting names. Albert
Trevor
Suarez,
Rogers, Cole Irvin.
You traded
Anthony
prospects.
Dominguez, Gregory Soto.
You traded a lot of prospects, and you took on salary. I don't know. the pitching staff, like as it stands right now, you got Grayson Rodriguez, Zach Eflin, Dean Kramer, Albert Suarez, Cade Povich, Trevor Rogers, Chase McDermott, Brandon Young. Kyle Bradish isn't helping the team in 2025. Tyler Wells isn't. John Means isn't. Like, that's unfortunate. But that group right there, is that going to win you a World Series? Absolutely not. But I think it's a pretty solid base to go off. And let's see if Trevor Rogers can come do something in the second go around. Let's see what McDermott and Young have. You can still make another Corbin Burns-esque trade. And again, we don't know what they're going to do in free agency as far as free agent signings. Let's see. Cooper says they won 10 fewer games. They only won 91 games this year. Back-to-back 90-plus win seasons, I think that's pretty good.
How many teams won 100 games this year? I can't remember.
I don't know. I'll
0.
take 100. Yeah. The Orioles were only one game worse than the Phillies over the final 82 games of the season, 81 games of the season. Like, that's teams were slumping. I think that's it. Yeah, those are all his points as to why the Orioles are behind schedule. I call bullcrap. That was a terrible article. You can grade it.
JJ Cooper does good stuff too sometimes.
Yeah, he's written fantastic articles about the Orioles and the state of this farm system and their draft picks and etc. I don't understand this. I don't understand that take. But yeah, I do agree. The 2024 season, it was a failure. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But there's so many good reasons to celebrate. There's a lot to fix. There's a lot to celebrate. But this team is not behind schedule.
And with that, let's turn the page and talk about what to fix. And thank you for taking that down, by the way, Nick. But let's talk about what there is to fix, because you're both right. The common narrative has been around pitching for so long with this organization. Now, because of the postseason exit, people are starting to talk a lot more about the bats. I have some bad news for anyone looking for a big free agent splash this offseason, which is that it's a pretty thin free agent class. Once you get beyond the Anthony Santanders and Cody Bellingers of the group, it starts to thin out quickly. Now, with that said, the Orioles still have a pretty good farm system. There is room for trade. At the same time, though, for all the ups and downs, the Orioles still had one of the best offenses in baseball. So if you guys are looking at where they need to improve and perhaps rely more on external help rather than internal help, what are the first spots that come to mind?
Offensively, there's really not that many spots, even like that I can see. I think first base is a glaring spot for me where you can make some improvements there. Ryan Mountcastle, love the guy, great dude. Saw he was signing autographs after the game. Like, but unfortunately, he's a league average bat with the above average glove at first base, and I just think between him and O'Hearn, that's, I think, O'Hearn's option. You have to pick it up. Maybe you trade him. Maybe you keep him as a bench piece, DH role player. But Mountcastle, to me, I don't think you can go into 2025. Wow, that's weird. With him penciled in as the everyday first baseman anymore. So I think I would personally look to move him and plus maybe a prospect for pitching, whether it's starting, relieving, prospect, whatever it is. I think you can move him out. And again, you can save like $7 million in arbitration there. And whether it's signing a Christian Walker, who's 33, maybe you can get him for a 3-year deal at like 20, 25 million a year. Think that would be nice. Or you bring Santander back and mix him in at first base more often, and then you can keep Heston Kjerstad as well. But first base is a glaring need. And then secondarily, I think a right-handed fourth outfielder would be nice with some pop, maybe like a Mark Canha. I mean, Teoscar Hernandez is like the dream, but I think maybe more realistic is like a Mark Canha type. But that's it for me.
And I love Mark Canha, and he actually played a lot of first base last year. So there we go. I'll take him. Yeah, it is unfortunate to see this free agent class not looking super deep, and it's Juan Soto, it's Santander, it's Teoscar, and that's it. Hopefully, if Cody Bellinger opts out of his contract, but as far as the outfielders, like that's it. As far as the big name guys go, so with the bats, it's like you're not going after Alex Bregman. You're not going after Pete Alonso, probably. Paul Goldschmidt, like he's 37 years old now. He might be washed. Like I'm not saying anyone else that's going to be able to step in and like make a massive impact. I'm sure there's some names here that could really fit in well. It's October 9th. I'm not diving into the mid-tier free agents to really dive in and look at splits and analytics and everything to decide good fits. I'm just looking at big name star power, and it's not there. And it's why like I mentioned this months ago when we talked about Santander. It's why I'm so adamant about please bring Santander back next year, because like losing that production is going to be hard to fill that void. I don't think you can expect Heston Kjerstad to replace that production this year if you lose Santander. Santander has almost as many home runs over the last 3 years as Heston Kjerstad has major league at bats. Like it's tough to replace. But that's a tricky situation in and of itself, because this is Tony's one chance to get that massive contract, and he deserves every penny. Like, go get your money. And it's that issue of, if whoever loses out on Juan Soto, are they going to then turn to Santander and unload the bag on him and completely outbid the Orioles? This is a corner outfielder with defensive limitations who's about to turn 30 years old. So I could see why the Orioles would be maybe a little bit hesitant. Hopefully there's a win-win contract in there somewhere and they can come to terms and Santander's back. But yeah, as far as like the bats go, you don't really see a whole lot. And even on the pitching side, like there's some interesting, obviously Corbin Burns would be top on the list. I'd love to see him back. Who wouldn't? Blake Snell's there, Max Fried's there. That's pretty much it, unless I'm missing someone else as far as like the aces go. You need the ace. You need to replace Corbin Burns. And I feel like it's probably going to be more so if you don't bring back Burns, and if Blake Snell and Max Fried, you get priced out there, I feel like it's going to be another Corbin Burns-esque trade, which I don't mind. Target the guys that have 1 year left. You get an ace at a discounted price. And look how that turned out this year. Like, I trade Joey Ortiz as much as I love him. I watched a lot of Brewers this year just to watch Joey. I'm trading Joey Ortiz and DL Hall for Corbin Burns 10 times out of 10 times. And then if you can secure that ace, though, and I like this mid-tier of pitching. You're talking about looking for external help, like Nathan Eovaldi, Yusei Kikuchi, who apparently the Orioles were really in on at the trade deadline, according to Rates and Barrels at least. Nick Pivetta, 80 grade first name, by the way. Like, I like that mid-tier free agents that hopefully this organization is going to be more aggressive with this offseason. Trade for that ace again. Sign 2 of these guys, these mid-tier guys. Bring Santander back. I think you're set up pretty nicely for 2025.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you are going to have to try to backfill a little bit with Corbin Burns, because there isn't a Corbin Burns available in trade every offseason. But I think Nick is right. There are enough mid-tier guys that even if you can't pull off a trade this offseason, if you bring in a Nathan Eovaldi, you bring in a Nick Pivetta, ideally you bring in more. Eovaldi's probably my top free agent target, knowing what could be realistic for the Orioles. But ideally, you're bringing in another starter with him. And then for the position players, I think the whole right side of the field is kind of in question right now, because Bob is absolutely right. You can get a lot more out of first base. Right field, we don't know what's going to happen with Santander, and I don't think it's a guarantee that they're going to hand the job right to Heston Kjerstad if Santander leaves. And while I have all the confidence in the world in Jackson Holliday, I do think you need to reinforce that floor at second base a little bit. Maybe it's as simple as keeping Ramon Arias around for another year and hoping the player we saw in the second half is what you get for all of next year, because that would be a pretty nice bench player to have and a good backup. Or maybe it's supplementing that with a veteran that isn't necessarily going to take away at bats from Holliday, but is going to be someone you can plug in when Holliday's going through a little bit of a skid, or there's just a matchup on a given night that does not favor him at all.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to have a right-handed option that could play second base. So yeah, maybe Ramon really had a strong second half, actually really strong May onward. So maybe that's the answer there. He can kind of be insurance for if there's an injury at third or second base, and he can be a platoon, at least in the beginning of the year with Holliday.
Or, I mean, like Jorge Mateo coming back. How much is he going to cost next year? I don't.
3.2, I think, was the MLB Trade Rumors estimation.
This organization clearly loves him. He played a lot of second base last year. He should be a full go. And I mean, he's a right-handed hitter. And let's see, versus lefties this season, his batting average, he hit 262 against lefties. He hit 204 against righties. OPS 799. So he's OPS in about 800 against lefties. You know, I did my thing where I was not a fan of Jorge Mateo, and then shout out to Andy Casca. He was the main guy there. I changed my tune, and I get it. I don't mind bringing Mateo back, and I think a lot of people owe Ramon Arias, myself included, an apology. Like, he really stepped up over that the second half of the year, and I wouldn't hate that at all either. If you just kind of roll with that infield again, and hopefully you've got a healthy Ramon Arias, you got a healthy Jordan Westberg, you got a healthy Jorge Mateo. I think the infield is fine, except I do agree that Mountcastle, like, I'm not going to be mad at all if you move on from Ryan Mountcastle. I think he's a pretty replaceable guy in the lineup. But
Yeah, if I saw a couple other corner outfielders that might be of interest in that right-handed hitting mold, Adam Duvall, Tyler O'Neill. I don't know how much they're going to cost, but I feel like there's some good pop from the right-handed side if you need them. As far as pitchers, I really like Sean Manaea. I think he's going to opt out. He's looked fantastic since dropping his arm slot. I know he's got that Chris Sale comparison, more like a poor man's Chris Sale. He's not quite that good, but I'd love to take a peek at him, see what his price would be on a contract. Luis Severino, like, there's some decent pitching options, much more than the position side. I feel like there was one other name I was going to say here. Andrew Heaney's kind of interesting. And yeah, you say Kikuchi, but wouldn't mind grabbing one of those guys. Maybe you trade for a Garrett Crochet, maybe Heston Kjerstad. If you can bring Santander back, maybe Heston Kjerstad can lead a trade for a Crochet type. Maybe you can extend him, or at least you'll have him for, I think, 2 years starting in 2025 compared to like Corbin Burns is one. But we'll see. It'll be interesting.
Are we still interested in Jesus Luzardo if he's healthy?
Hey, you never know if the price is right.
I feel like there was conversations about that. Like,
Sandy Alcantara.
there was a real connection there. I don't know. I still go back to Seattle too. Seattle has a ton of arms, and I know they're probably going to be reluctant to trade some of them. But like
Luis Castillo.
Yeah, if you're Seattle, I think you almost have to trade Luis Castillo. I mean, you don't have to, but I feel like that would not be a terrible move, and I would not hate watching him every 5 days in an Orioles uniform.
Yeah, I do think you'll see that the Orioles are in negotiations with Burns up to the end. I don't think we're going to be the high bidder, but I think we will be involved most of the way through his market. I think someone will give him stupid money, but we'll be right there.
We'll have a lot to break down over the course of the offseason, and we'll really kick that off at Checker Spot on Monday night. And we're kind of considering that episode to be a state of the Orioles. We'll talk a little bit about what went right and what went wrong in 2024. Try to get answers to some of the questions that I think are most pressing on Orioles fans' minds. And part of that will be we will actually take questions from the audience at that episode. So as a reminder, that is Monday, October 14th at 6 p.m. Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street in Baltimore. Between now and then, we will be back with another episode, and we're looking forward to this because we're going to turn our attention back to the minor leagues for this one. We're going to give out our season-ending awards. You will not want to miss that. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to sign up to become a member of our Patreon community. And you can get a shout out just like our new patron did at the beginning of this episode and have access to a bunch of bonus content and perks over the course of the offseason. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to hand out our hardware for the 2024 seasons. We recognize the best of the best in the Orioles minor league system with our annual awards. We're going to have everything from player of the year to manager/coach of the year, breakout player, and more. And that will all be on tonight's episode. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. And as a reminder, we are just a few days away from our live show at Checker Spot Brewing. That will be Monday night, October 14th at 6 p.m. As we announced on our earlier this week, Andy Koska of the Baltimore Banner is going to be joining us, as will Connor Newcomb, the host of Locked On Orioles. We may have more guests to announce between now and then. We're still working to book more contributors to that episode, so stay tuned for our socials for announcements on that. We also plan to take listener questions and take a deep dive into the state of the Orioles. That will be next week at Checker Spot Brewing. And Bob and Nick, I know we're all three really looking forward to that episode.
Yeah, it'll be a nice way to really kind of unburden 2024 and really look forward to 2025. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Hoping to see as many listeners out there as possible. Love getting to meet you guys. So, yeah, absolutely looking forward to it.
Just come drink away the pain. We can all we can all sulk together, have some drinks, good food at Checker Spot too, and hit the reset button and look forward to the offseason.
We are indeed looking forward to that. And on tonight's episode, though, we're going to look back at the 2024 season in the minor leagues as we hand out our awards. Now, just a quick overview of how this works. The three of us each had individual ballots where we picked our top 3 players or coaches for the award. The player with the most first place votes typically got the award, as first place votes were worth 3 points. Second place vote was worth 2 points, and then the third spot was worth 1 point. It was an aggregate to come up with the final winners, and we'll break down our individual ballots over the course of this episode, but we're not going to do that right away because we have a unanimous winner for both Player of the Year and Pitcher of the Year, and we'll start with Player of the Year. That belongs to Kobe Mayo. Mayo did get a cameo in the major leagues this year where there were some ups and downs, but he was absolutely dominant in the minor leagues this season. Not only arguably the best all-around hitter in the Orioles minor league system, but maybe one of the best in all of minor league baseball, given that he was doing it against older competition at AAA, hitting for average, hitting for power, drawing a good walk rate. He had a really strong year, and he edges out Samuel Basayo, who placed second on all 3 of our ballots. Creed Williams came in third on Bob and Nick's ballots, while I had Enrique Bradfield Jr. rounding out my group. Bob, I'll start with you here. Let's just talk about Mayo and his unanimous selection. Just how good was this 2024 season?
It was so good that he missed a month or so of the season with a fractured rib and still performed and he missed basically a month of the season due to being in the majors, which congrats to him. I'm sure, that's a dream come true, and he will absolutely build upon that and have a much better 2025 at the big leagues. But still, he was so dominant with the bat in AAA that it was an easy choice for me. I had Samuel Basayo second, but really it was an easy choice for number 1. The power, the defense is what it is. It's going to get better. I think Mike Elias's comments were actually kind of interesting to try to interpret. It sounds like maybe first base is going to be more of an option next year, but we'll see. But yeah, I think the growth that he's shown year to year is just tremendous, and I expect that to continue from 2024 to 2025. Maybe Rookie of the Year in 3 in a row. Could be if Colton Cowser wins this year. So congrats to Mayo. It was an awesome season, regardless of the struggles in the major leagues.
Yeah, this one, Nothing new to add here that we haven't said over and over again this season about Kobe Mayo and even Samuel Sayo, but like I think none of us are boomer beat writers who vote for these awards just based on batting average and baseline stats. And which is why my initial thought was actually to go with Basayo here because of his performance, age, position, and the fact that he ended the year with a respectable performance in AAA. But I just think Kobe Mayo's performance goes way overlooked when you also consider his age and progress. He was also very impressive. Kobe was 4 years younger than his peers in AAA this season and had just 14 plate appearances, not counting the major leagues, obviously, just looking at his minor league time, only 14 plate appearances against pitchers younger than him. Basayo was also 4 years younger than his competition when he was in AA and did not face a single pitcher younger than him all year. But Mayo did all that at the AAA level. 22 home runs, a 135 WRC plus in Norfolk. Combine all the advances he made with that bat this year, like that's why I put Mayo up at the top there, and I think he fully deserves it. It was a fantastic year, and I am pretty stoked to see what he can do next year in the major leagues. Now that he got that taste out of the way, I think he's the kind of guy that what we know about him and the type of player he is, the type of person he is. I think his experience in the major leagues this year was not very good. Point blank, like it just wasn't. But I think that just added fuel to the fire, and he is going to be on a mission this offseason to prove a lot of doubters wrong next year.
We'll move on now to pitcher of the year. And just like with player of the year, this was a unanimous selection that goes to Brandon Young, who had a nice bounce back from injury this year. He was recognized by the Orioles as their pitcher of the year, as Mayo was position player of the year. And pitcher of the year was a really competitive race. And I think we'll talk about that. But Young wins our award unanimously after putting up strong numbers between AA Bowie and AAA Norfolk this year. The key thing for Young, as I talked about a lot during the course of the season, he seemed to manage, if not completely overcome, a lot of the challenges that pitchers have had adjusting to AAA this year, in the last few years, because of the automated ball strike zone, because of the change in baseballs. Young handled all of that smoothly in a dominant 2024 campaign. He was followed by Cameron Weston, who placed second on all three of our ballots. Weston built off a strong 2023 season to have an excellent 2024 between High A Aberdeen and Double A Bowie. And this was the year of the pitcher. There were a lot of choices for pitcher of the year that could have made strong cases. And maybe you don't think that if you look at our first two selections, considering it was unanimous. But the three of us did not have the same person last on our ballot. I had Michael Ferret, Bob had Chase McDermott, and Nick had Alex Pham. And honestly, all of these pitchers belong in this conversation. But let's start with Young. Nick, there's not a lot to be left said about Young at this point in the season, but kind of give us an overview of why he's such a deserving choice for this award and why we should be talking about him as maybe part of the answer for the Orioles pitching plans in 2025.
It was 1A and 1B for me between Brandon Young and Cameron Weston, and the deciding factor for me though was the fact that it was out of Weston's control, but it was the fact that Brandon Young, he's only pitched 53 innings over the last 2 years, and a lot of those were rehab innings because he pitches 13 innings in 2022, has Tommy John surgery, his second Tommy John surgery, and then finished with 40 innings in 2023. Comes out in 2024, gets promoted to AAA after just a few outings where he had 32 strikeouts and 4 walks in his first few outings with Bowie. Ends up throwing 111 innings this year, which I think is kind of insane. And actually, when I remember looking back at that and thinking, okay, when we're looking at the end of the year, could Brandon Young make his major league debut in 2024? I look back now and be like, I kind of see why he didn't, because he only had 53 innings over the last 2 years, and then he went to 111 this year. That's pretty impressive. It's kind of like, okay, you're back, you're healthy. You are one of the most dominant pitchers in this farm system right now. Like we can pump the brakes a little bit. He had the 5th most innings among all Orioles minor league arms. He finished 3rd in strikeouts as well with 132. Like that's pretty awesome numbers. He's now he's going to be on a top 100 list next preseason, and he's going to be on the Orioles 40-man roster here in a couple of weeks. So I'm pretty stoked to see what Brandon Young can do in the major leagues next year, because he's going to get that shot at some point.
Yeah, for me, it was between him and Weston the whole way. The reason Young gets the nod for me is just he was so consistent at AAA. Like, even late in the season, obviously, like Nick said, he only threw so many innings before this year, but he pitched all year, and he pitched over 100 innings, I want to say, and he was still right in there at the very end of the season doing the same things, and he actually got better moving up to AAA from his short time in AA. Just a fantastic story, a fantastic season, a fantastic pitcher. And as far as third place, yeah, I picked. Who did I pick again? Chase McDermott, but there were also other options that I considered: Edgar Portes, Zach Fruit, Trey Gibson, Nestor Erman. So yeah, you're the pitcher for sure.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. For me, it was a really tough call between Weston and Young. And I think that if you were going to go off purely off some of the baseline stats, you might have given it to Weston. Weston had the lower ERA over the course of the season. But I agree with Nick that when you consider the full context, and this is something that Cameron Weston absolutely can't control, when you consider the full context of what Young had to overcome to get to this point, it makes his season all the more impressive. And then I just think the fact that we split on the last vote says a lot about the state of pitching in the farm system this year, because honestly, I can make a case for Alex Pham. I can make a case for Chase McDermott. I could have made a case for Michael Ferret. And there were guys that were not on my ballot that I could have made a case for. Just like Bob said, Edgar Portes, Zach Fruit, Trey Gibson. There's a long list of guys that we could have highlighted here. We just didn't have the room for.
Yeah, like you look at the minor league strikeout leaders, Chase McDermott, he missed a lot of minor league time this year, a lot. And he still finished number one in the system with 144 strikeouts. Alex Pham was second at 138. Then it was Brandon Young, then Armbruster at 131, and then Cameron Weston at 127. Those are the top five. I think I don't know how many guys had 100 plus strikeouts. It was like more than 10 guys, I think, had 100 plus strikeouts this year. Yeah, I just think Young cemented himself as a top 100 prospect. Cameron Weston cemented himself, I think, as one of the top pitching prospects in this system. And I cannot wait for the "who is Cameron Weston" tweets all next year when people start paying attention. And it's like, been trying to tell you for 2 years. Go back through the Twitter feed, find out the highlights there. Cameron Weston is got it. And Pham, like, that's second. Those last 2 months, 2+ months of the year for Alex Pham, I'm not going to lie. I was worried about Pham because that first half of the year, it was rocky. But those last 2 months of the year for Pham, where he was probably one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant arm down there on the farm. I think Pham is going to, honestly, the bigger conversation we have about Alex Pham is when we start talking about Rule 5. I do think there is a part of it's just because to make more content, but I do think there is a legitimate conversation that we can have about Alex Pham because he is Rule 5 eligible now this offseason.
And with that, now we'll move on to our next award, which was Breakout Player of the Year. And this is a continuation of the theme of Pitcher of the Year. And while neither of these guys actually placed in our ballots for Pitcher of the Year, they were strong candidates for Breakout Player of the Year, and they split this award. That is Nestor Herman and Killer Morphe. And we're talking about two players, different stages of their careers, that had much different stories this season, but both seemingly came out of nowhere to dominate at two levels. For Herman, that season started at Delmarva after he was chosen in the 11th round by the Orioles in the 2023 draft. He overcame an early season injury to dominate at the low A level before being promoted to high A and putting up arguably better numbers over the final 7 outings of his season. Morphe, meanwhile, completely broke onto the scene with an excellent year down in the Dominican Summer League that earned him a promotion all the way up to Delmarva when the DSL season concluded. He's also starting to get a little bit of national attention, which makes sense when you see him pump fastballs into the high 90s regularly in his starts and occasionally flash a really nasty changeup to go along with a good slider. There's a lot to like about Morphe. There's a lot to like about Nestor Herman. But just kind of for our listeners that maybe have not had a chance to really process these guys or dig into them, and I'll go back to Nick here for this one. What makes these two players so deserving of our breakout players of the year?
I was pulling up these reports, like I mentioned in the previous episode, after we bashed JJ Cooper. We're gonna go back to Baseball America because they've been there. As soon as the minor league season ends, they put out phenomenal content to recap the minor league season, and we get some more good data that we did not get during the year. Here we go. Nestor Herman, like you said, came out of nowhere. I searched the depths of the internet after we drafted this guy, and I found nothing. He impressed in his debut, got hurt this year, came back from injury, dominated, got promoted to high A, dominated even more. He's a top 30 prospect in our system. If you see a top 30 list next year when they start to roll out and you don't see Nestor Herman on the list, close the tab. It's not a real list. Here's Herman. He increased his fastball velo to 94 miles per hour. His slider velo is up 3 ticks this year, up to 86 miles per hour. So that's in the range you want to see that slider at. 5-pitch mix. Every single one of his pitches had a whiff rate that ranked in the 85th or better percentile, which, according to my scouting scale, that's stupid good on the rating there. Baseball America grades all 5 of his pitches as above average or better. Phenomenal. Keeler Morphe, we've talked about him a lot. Got the article up on Substack. Go check that out. And Baseball America, again, just put out their top 31 prospects for the DSL. And the Orioles had 4 prospects on that list because shout out to international scouting and player development. It is on fire right now. Morphe, they donned as having the best stuff in the Dominican Summer League this past year. He averaged 98 miles per hour on the fastball, which was tops in the Orioles farm system this year. Was not tops in baseball. I think that was a guy for the Nationals. Susana, I think he's with the Nationals. But still, 98 miles per hour, and he is an 18-year-old child. Double plus grade on the slider. He might be a small guy and only 18 years old. He doesn't turn 19 until next June. He's averaging 98 with a double plus slider. He gets bigger and stronger. I think he's got a pretty solid floor. There's a late inning power arm, but he's so good and so impressive. And like I know Zach saw him in person, I believe, in Delmarva. I thought he more than held his own as an 18-year-old kid in Delmarva. It's completely skipping the FCO.
Yeah, I was going to say what makes these guys special, just stuff. Like I think Nestor Herman might go down as the steal of the draft 2023 when all is said and done. I think, yeah, I guess there's reports where he was up there in stuff plus along the likes of Paul Skeens and whoever it was. I mean, maybe that seems correct now a year later. And Keeler Morphe, I feel like Mason Miller is right here at home potentially. So yeah, just incredible stuff for these pitchers. They're just gonna continue to catapult up these rankings next year as well. And I'm shocked and appalled that you guys did not select Aaron Estrada, not even a third place vote. It's just unbelievable to me. But not to take away from Herman and Morphe, they're very deserving because they were on my list as well. But Aaron Estrada, disrespect. Who do you think you are, Ben Dorst?
I'll go back to my thoughts on Herman and Morphe in a minute, but I'm glad you brought that up, Bob, because our ballots here really vary more than they do in any other category. Bob had Aaron Estrada first on his ballot, but he did not make Nick or my ballot. I had Herman first. Nick had Morphe first. All 3 of us had Herman on our ballots, however, and all 3 of us had Trey Gibson. Actually, Bob did not have Trey Gibson on his ballot. Nick and I had Trey Gibson on our ballots. Nick had him third. I had him second. He fell off of Bob's ballots. Bob had Estrada, Morphe, Herman. Nick had Morphe, Herman, Gibson. So really an interesting mix here. And I kind of feel about this award like I feel about Pitcher of the Year, which is that there are probably 10 players that should have been in the mix, and I considered Estrada strongly for all 3 spots. But I guess for me, Estrada has been on the radar since 2022. So maybe that bias kind of crept into my decision making, but I know nationally Estrada probably was not getting that recognition until this year, and he deserved it.
Yeah, for the real sickers like us, we kind of knew about him, but I mean, this year was pretty special for him. I felt like.
Yeah. That's the hard part in this is that we are literally every single day like watching, talking about, tweeting about, writing about like this is all we do, I feel like, for months out of the year. So yeah, for me, Estrada, I feel the same way. It was like, well, we already knew he was really good and like a fantastic hitter, but I know there are like 99% of Orioles fandom has no clue who Aaron Estrada is. And because he was in the DSL last year. But yeah, I think that was definitely a good pick. And I can Trey Gibson real quick since he was on two of our lists. Just one note on Trey Gibson because again we've talked about him a lot before, giving him his flowers. But again, another interesting note here: postseason, Trey Gibson has a 7-foot extension when he pitches. So for reference, that is a slight tick under what Grayson Rodriguez is. Grayson Rodriguez is 7'3" according to Baseball Savant. And also, according to Baseball Savant, Grayson Rodriguez, that puts him in the 97th percentile in Major League Baseball in extension. And Trey Gibson is right there, just 3 inches short. So, like, Trey Gibson only sits 94 miles per hour, but that fastball is playing up like it's a high 90s fastball, multiple breaking balls. He does walk a lot of guys, but if he gets that under control, Trey Gibson is going to go from undrafted pitcher out of a make-believe university, sorry, Trey, to like, he has scouts who legitimately believe he can pitch in a major league rotation, which is like mind blowing, to be honest.
Brandon Young-esque.
Yeah.
We'll move on now to manager coach of the year and kind of an interesting mix there of ballots again, once again in this category, but the award goes to Aberdeen pitching coach Jordy Henry. And honestly, and I say this as someone who had Henry at the top of the ballot, it's kind of hard to argue with this choice given the success of Aberdeen's pitching staff, not only statistically, but how we saw a lot of their pitchers break out, whether it was guys in their first full seasons like Zach Fruit, or players that had been steadily rising up the system over the last few years, like Edgar Portes. A lot of pitchers took steps forward under the guidance of Henry in Aberdeen this year. Now, Bob, I know that he was not at the top of your ballot, but you live close to Aberdeen. You got a chance to see them a few times this year, and you did have him second on your list of selections. What about Aberdeen's pitching staff stood out?
Literally everyone, literally everything. It's like part of it is they had just a bunch of talented arms there to work with, but at the same time, these are all younger, rawer pitching prospects, and he was able to equal that to success on the field. And that's even with Juan Nunez going down with an injury. So, yeah, I think he was very close to being my number one. I'm just a huge Roberto Mercado fan and had him number one again. But, yeah, fantastic job. Even guys like Zane Barnhart, like even some relievers. I'm trying to think. The guy that was in the trade for Cole Irvin and Daryl Hernandez, Kyle Verbitsky. He might have turned him into like a legitimate relief prospect now. Yeah, just you can go up and down that Aberdeen pitching staff, and it's like interesting, keeping track, like just impeccable.
Yeah, let me look real quick. I had Jordy Henry second on my list, and it was because that Aberdeen pitching staff, I said this was like the epicenter of year of the pitcher with all those arms. Michael Ferret, when he gets Trey Gibson, Nestor Herman, that group we talked about, when they got moved up to high A Aberdeen in their first years, some of these guys, like even Michael Ferret being as young as he is, didn't miss a beat. They actually looked even better in high A than they did in low A. Zach Fruit had a phenomenal year. Zach Fruit throwing 100 plus miles per hour. It's hard because we don't know the ins and outs of the minor league coach. Like we don't know the ins and outs of the major league side of things when it comes to the coaching staff. So the minor league side is a whole different story. But yeah, for this one, I felt like Aberdeen's pitching staff was so successful. Yeah. With Mercado, who else did I have on my list? So I had Mercado third on my list. He's coaching the Arizona Fall League team right now out there in Surprise Segueros, Arizona. Mercado, I know a lot of people. I think I talked about this on when I did that quick Arizona Fall League preview episode. I just think a lot of people instantly want to like put Buck Britton in the major leagues or like think he's the heir apparent to Brandon Hyde if he were to leave or be removed. I think Roberto Mercado is going to be in a major league dugout in the very near future, and I hope it's in Baltimore. Like I would not be shocked if Roberto Mercado is not in a major league clubhouse in within the next year or two, to be completely honest. And 2 years ago, he was working in high school. He got his first coaching job in High Aberdeen, and Aberdeen had a historic year, one of their best years in franchise history. Gets promoted to Double A. They have another great year. He's out in the Arizona Fall League right now. I will reference this so many times. That Frederick Ben Cosme interview, you guys talked with him. His story about Roberto Mercado was unbelievable. He's got the tweets. They hate to see you go, but love to watch you leave. Tweets are the best thing in baseball. It's the one reason, honestly, why I haven't deleted Twitter off the phone at this point. I love it. I went though with my top guy was Chris Madera, who he was the manager of the DSL Orioles Orange squad. And I just went with him just because DSL Orioles Orange was the only team to make the playoffs this year. Pretty good numbers offensively and defensively. I, I went there, and I thought it was pretty cool that he had a pro career with the Red Sox in their minor league system. I don't think he ever made the major leagues, but then he actually spent his last year playing in 2019 with the Orioles. So the Orioles signed him to a minor league deal in 2019, and he was a bounce around guy. But I think that was to groom him to be a coach, and he was released and ended up becoming a coach down there in the DR for the Orioles for the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that could be a guy to keep an eye on as he moves up the ranks in the system.
Stole the words right out of my mouth with Mercado. I mean, this is a major league manager in the making. I think he's going to be, yeah, hopefully he's sticks around with the Orioles. I like you said, I think within 2-3 years he's in a major league clubhouse, and hopefully it's the Orioles.
And before we move on, Bob, you had one guy who did not make Nick Rye's ballot, but although he was very, very close on mine, Felipe Alou Jr. That's the manager of Aberdeen.
Yeah, just again, I just think that's a really interesting spot with the international program coming along, where that's a big jump up from low A to high A. Probably the second biggest jump other than AAA to the majors, at least based on what we've heard in the past couple of years. And yeah, I think he's just done a really good job at being able to transition at, like Aaron Estrada went from Delmarva to Aberdeen, didn't miss much of a beat. And I think you could say the same for a lot of guys. So just shout out to him.
Yeah. He was the guy in Delmarva last year. He was the manager in Delmarva last year, and I mean he had a really important job where that was that first core of international players really in this system, and he was there leading those guys off the field. All those stories that we had with Delmarva's broadcaster, the name is escaping me. Sam Jelnick, when we had him on, and those amazing stories he had behind the scenes, like John Muley's articles about what they're teaching these guys off the field stuff. Felipe Alou has been extremely instrumental in helping the international players in the system along the way.
Exactly. And with that, we'll move into our final award, and that is Platinum Glove. And this honestly was another very close call. I know for myself it was. In the end, that award goes to Enrique Bradfield Jr., who flashed the leather at two levels this season, high A Aberdeen and double A Bowie. Judd Fabian comes in second, and then Jackson Holiday third, while Carter Young picked up a vote and he finished fourth in this. But in the end, the win goes to Bradfield. Bob, I'll start with you. You and I had Bradfield at the top of our ballots. I know for myself, it was a very, very close call between him and Fabian. But why do you think Bradfield separates himself from this group?
Mostly just the 80 grade speed. I think he gets good jumps. He's like a really good outfielder without the speed, but that we've seen with Cedric Mullins in center field now at the Orioles for a few years. That closing speed can really make a difference in saving a double or a triple. Yeah, I just think he's fantastic out there. And like you said, very close, because Fabian almost is good. Without the speed, he still is tracking everything down. He's making fantastic catches, and he has an arm to gun people down with as well. So between those two, I think in the next few years, the Orioles outfield defense is going to be pretty spectacular. Going to be hard to get a ball to fall in there in Camden Yards.
It was splitting hairs for me. Like, Enrique Bradfield Jr. is a phenomenal defender. Like we've talked about before, he just needs to be semi-competent with the bat, and he's going to have a tremendous major league career. And if that bat continues to develop as it did this year, he's going to be a stud in the major leagues. Still a long way to go there, but the floor, as we've talked about over and over again, is that elite defense, that elite speed. That's going to get him to the major leagues. I have no doubt there. I just gave my vote to Judd Fabian just because, like Bob mentioned, the arm was a big separator. He's got that strong arm out there in center field. And I think Judd Fabian just gets overlooked a little bit because you've got, Enrique Bradfield Jr., who's got the 80 grade speed, the 80 grade defense, first round pick out of Vanderbilt. Fabian's just as good defensively, I think. And yeah, he doesn't have the speed, but I think what he lacks in speed, he makes up for in a lot of other areas of his defensive profile. And like I mentioned earlier, I think Fabian profiles perfectly as a really solid fourth outfield option. He can play all three spots. He can change the game with one swing of the bat. He's got that immense raw power. He's a threat on the base paths. The arm is really, really good. He made so many phenomenal plays throwing guys out from center field this year. I don't know. I really hope the bat comes around for Fabian. But as far as defense goes, yeah, these two pretty good defensive guys to have in your system.
And the Carter Young Assance is arriving, so that's why I had to throw him in at number 3. Honestly, I just didn't want to do the obvious number 3 pick with Jackson Holliday. Obviously very deserving. Did a great job at learning second base after being a shortstop his whole career. But Carter Young, good defense out there. Wanted to give him a bit of a shout out.
I almost gave my third vote to Freddie Bencosme just because we talked about it before, but just to highlight it again one last time before we wrap up this season. Like, I don't know if he was deserving of like one of the greatest defenders in the system, but as far as growth defensively, Freddie Bencosme won that award as far as growth goes.
Breakout Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, it was close on Ben Cosme, and I'm glad that Carter Young got some recognition. He has looked pretty good defensively throughout his professional career, and hopefully what we saw with the bat towards the end of the season at Bowie is a sign of things to come. And with that, that does it for our awards. And as a quick recap, Kobe Mayo takes Player of the Year. Pitcher of the Year goes to Brandon Young, while Nestor Herman and Keeler Morphe split our Breakout Player of the Year. Jordy Henry, the pitching coach for the Aberdeen Ironbirds, is our manager / coach of the year. And Enrique Bradfield Jr. wins our Platinum Glove. We're not finished talking about the minor leagues by a long shot here in the coming months at Orioles on the Verge, because we're going to be able to break down the Rule 5 draft. We're going to talk about any prospects that are perhaps dealt or acquired in trades. We're going to talk about the Arizona Fall League more at some point. So we're going to have plenty of coverage for you in the offseason. But as a reminder, our show Monday, October 14th at Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street in South Baltimore, not far from Oriole Park at Camden Yards, will be mostly Major League focused. And again, that is Monday, October 14th at 6 p.m. We are slated to be joined by friends of the show, Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles and Andy Koska over at the Baltimore Banner. We hope to announce more guests between now and Monday, and you can look for those announcements on our social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community today to have access to bonus Discord channels, exclusive off-season content, and more. You're not going to want to miss that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Bleed Podcast Network. We hope to see you at Checker Spot on Monday.